This is our video on participial phrases, particularly how we punctuate participial phrases. So a participial phrase sometimes take commas, and sometimes participial phrases don't take commas. So let's take a look at why. Well, it usually depends on the noun that it's modifying, but it also can depend on where the participial phrase is located. Let's focus on that first part, the noun that it's modifying. So rule number one is like a restrictive appositive, a restrictive participial phrase is essential to the sentence, and therefore it won't be set off with commas. This is the same rule with appositives, the same rule with a relative clause. If it's restrictive, we don't want to put commas in. If I said the teacher sleeping beneath a collapsed stack of DVDs was Mr. Burns, well, I want you to see that teacher is pretty general. So therefore, that participial phrase is nice because it helps explain which particular teacher it is. It restricts all the teachers that are out there to one particular, the one sleeping beneath a collapsed stack of DVDs. That's the one we're referring to. The second rule then is the opposite. Like non-restrictive appositives or a non-restrictive adjective clause, a non-restrictive participial phrase, they're basically not essential to the sentence, and therefore they will be set off with commas. So Senior Dell's car, littered with Filet-O-Fish wrappers and used wet wipes, confirmed the rumor that our favorite Spanish teacher was living in his Subaru. Well, Senior Dell's car is pretty specific. Unless he has many cars, I assume he has one car. And for that reason, I can put commas around this participial phrase because I don't really necessarily have to specify which car it is. He has only one, so therefore the commas make sense. So besides it modifying a certain noun and that noun helping us decide whether we're going to put commas in or not, the other part of this whole factor of a participial phrase is where it's located. Rule number 3 says when a participial phrase begins the sentence, it always is separated with a comma. It doesn't matter what noun it modifies, a specific or a general noun, who cares? If it starts the sentence, it takes the comma. If I said playing with the Bunsen burner, Mrs. Shockey ignited her hair due to the exorbitant amount of hairspray. Well, Mrs. Shockey's pretty specific, but regardless, the participial phrase starts the sentence, so it gets the comma. If I changed it to a general noun and said, looking down at her phone, the girl slipped on the banana peel on the cafeteria floor, well, girl's pretty general. It doesn't matter. We're still going to put a comma because the participial phrase begins the sentence. Rule number 4 is a really interesting one. So when the participial phrase actually modifies the subject of the sentence, it's allowed to actually be shifted from the beginning of the sentence all the way to the end of the sentence, as long as it still is separated by a comma. So that same sentence, looking down at her phone, the girl slipped on the banana peel on the cafeteria floor. I can take this participial phrase describing the word girl, and I can move it all the way to the end of the sentence and put a comma. The girl slipped on the banana peel on the cafeteria floor, looking down at her phone. This is called a free modifier. A free modifier. It means that it's a modifier that sort of has the freedom to kind of go wherever it wants to, and as long as it has that comma, it's still technically describing that opening subject. That's fun. If I said, playing with the Bunsen burner, Mrs. Shockey ignited her hair due to the exorbitant amount of hairspray, and I can move it to the back part, Mrs. Shockey ignited her hair due to the exorbitant amount of hairspray, playing with the Bunsen burner. In this case, it's still called a free modifier. That comma tells me that it's modifying Mrs. Shockey. Now, this is tricky, and I don't necessarily recommend it for a lot of us, but it's allowed. The tricky part is it can look and sound a lot like the hairspray is playing with the Bunsen burner. And so when I take the comma out, it really sounds bad. So if I say, ooh, the exorbitant amount of hairspray playing with the Bunsen burner, even with the comma, you could look at it as having a problem. But when I take the comma out, it really has an issue. We would call this a misplaced modifier. The comma kind of saves it, but I'm not a huge fan of the free modifier just because sometimes you can really misread that sentence. Sometimes the same sentence is correct with and without commas. We found that with relative clauses. We're going to find it again with participial phrases. Just remember that it changes the meaning. If I said the AP teachers charged with accepting money in exchange for high grades were caught after apparently flaunting their wealth by using $100 bills as face masks. And I wrote the same sentence all over again, but this time took the commas out. Well, those have two different meanings. This first one means that all of the AP teachers were involved in the scandal. Mr. Achille, Mrs. White, Mr. Shockey, Mr. Kiefer, etc. They're all in on this scandal. But if I do the second sentence, that means that only some of the teachers were involved. Oh, it wasn't Mr. Achille, it wasn't Mr. Keefe, it was Mrs. Garrett, or only some of the AP. So therefore, when I take the commas out, it restricts which particular AP teachers you're referring to. When I put the commas in, it kind of implies all. So be careful of the some when the all, or I'm sorry, only some and all sort of issue with commas. So let's practice that back page and then see what we can do to actually add commas in where we think the commas belong.